Hey guys, we're going to do the review for test 2. It's actually already up and posted. I extended the due date for it through spring break, so it will be due that Sunday before spring break ends, which would be March 10th, I believe. Yes, March 10th at 10:55 will be your due date. So you can go ahead and get it done this week if you want to before spring break starts. Or if you're one of those that procrastinates and wants to worry about it after spring break, have more time to study, that's fine too. I figured since you guys aren't doing any of their class things, I would just go ahead and extend it out to give you more time if you wanted that. And if not, it's up and ready to go. You can go ahead and take it at any point. So I'm going to go ahead and go through review with you. If you watch and understand the review and read the chapters and review the PowerPoints, you will be more than ready for this exam. Okay. So the first thing that you really need to make sure you understand is remember when we talked in the PowerPoints, you would have, and in the chapters, you would have read about mission statements, strategic plans. Understand how when you're really wanting to know the aims and priorities of your organization, that the best place to find that is through the organization's mission statement. Make sure you understand that when you're in the middle of planning something, doing a plan for expanding the organization or plan for anything from the organization, that you need to set up evaluations throughout it. That you wouldn't just have a pre and a post evaluation. You want to be evaluating through your entire planning process. Some other things about planning that you want to remember is how it's really important to be flexible and always willing to change things with changing in circumstances. When you're planning something and making process objectives, you need to make sure those process objectives are just clear, distinct statements. They're not going to have like timelines or percentages in them. They're going to be just a clear, distinct statement. So example, you would say that I'm creating a process objective for my stroke program. So I'm going to say that every nurse completes a dysphagia screening on every patient admitted for stroke. That actually is a standard that the American Stroke Association has in place. So that is a process objective for a stroke program. So another important thing to remember and review is looking at when an organization is doing planning processes and developing new policies. You need to make sure that subordinates or people at the direct care are involved. Remember, we want to make sure that whenever we're developing any new plans, any new policies, order sets, those kind of things we talked about when you were like being a leader, that you need to make sure direct care is involved from the beginning. The people below your subordinates in any process really need to be involved right away. So understanding what makes something an aged organization, what stifling innovation is, those are important things to remember. Know the Lewin's change theory and the processes, unfreezing, refreezing, understand all of that. A nurse, I'm just going through, make sure I hit everything on this section. Understand all of your change strategies, including power, coercive, normative, how reductive, rational, empirical. Make sure you understand the difference in what they mean. Understand planned change and how it's identifying the options and resources available to implement change. That is the actions required when you're having a planned change. So remember about time management and what people should do first when they're evaluating time management, and how it's really important to allow enough time for sufficient daily planning when you're working on time management, and how it's very important to plan out for your day, making priority lists and those sorts of things. So understand why first and middle level managers experience more upper interruptions than higher level managers. You got to remember that they are more interacting with more individuals and those direct caregivers. So they are more at the bedside. They're the ones that are there with direct care. So they have more people to come interrupt them. There's more, they may have 150 staff that report up to them as the first level, mid level manager, and then the person above them may only have 5 to 10 people reporting. So they're not going to get as many interruptions in their day because those first level, mid level managers are fielding a lot of the interruptions. So understand that process. Um, understand how to address issues for internal time wasters. So those things that can really cause you to waste time, like large quantities of paperwork that's having to be created. Those can be those internal time wasters, and sometimes it's good to go through that and see, are there any of these things that I don't have to do or that we could readdress to say maybe this doesn't have to be done anymore. Um, and like we talked about, creating lists and things, understand that it's really important to be flexible while making those lists. And that if you have a set list for your day, that doesn't mean that that has to exactly stay that way, that you need to be open and flexible and willing to change and add or take things away that aren't appropriate based on that list. It's a good outline for your day, but it's not a set in stone plan. Um, it's important that you should that managers should understand ways to prevent inefficiency. This could mean that if you have a like door open policy, that can sometimes get in the way because it's great to have that, but you need to understand when the door needs to be closed so you can get work done, because on a management level, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the computer in the office. So sometimes it's better to actually schedule appointments so that your interactions can be protected and controlled, because having that open door policy will cause it to where people just come in and out and you can't get your work done. So it's sometimes better to actually have scheduled appointment time. But that's a better option to help you organize your time and be more efficient. So if you're working on a large and complex plan that's going to require a lot of time and effort, it's really important to make sure you break the tasks into smaller, less demanding units. They'll help you get the task done more efficiently over time, and it's easier to tackle instead of this big, huge thing if you break it down into those smaller tasks. So when a manager is participating in fiscal planning for the first time, it's important for them to understand that it can be overwhelming, that fiscal planning can be a learned skill that more improves with practice. It's not something we always learn. We don't really learn fiscal planning in nursing school. And even if you go on to your master's, if you do like nurse leadership, you may understand that more. But those like myself, I clinical nurse specialist is my background. Fiscal planning is not something that was really taught in the graduate level. Something that you kind of learn on the job and will get better as time progresses with it. So it's important to understand how each manager of a unit is accountable for the way the resources are used on that unit. Units are all run differently around organizations, and it's that direct care manager, direct manager over that unit that's responsible for the way things are run. Making sure I don't miss anything for you guys. Another thing to remember when talking about fiscal planning and how it's something that's learned, it's important to know your budget when doing that, and then also to be visionary, to identify the short and long-term units, fiscal needs. So what do you need right now? Like, what are those things that we can't live out? This has to be taken care of. I need to work this into the budget. And then what are those things that are kind of like our wish list, things that we would really like to see that maybe we see needing to happen in the long term. We can get away with this quarter of not being able to take care of that, but it has to be completed by the end of the year. So understand your short and long term fiscal needs. So usually when understand zero-based budgeting, and it's a kind of budgeting that we use when fiscal planning, and understand that would be like a manager being required to justify each item of the following year's proposed budget. So it's zero-based budgeting. Every single thing needs to be accounted for and understand what that is. Understand the different kind of categories of cost and things that aren't controllable. So for like controllable cost, fixed cost, capital budget, and non-controllable costs. Understand that when it comes to budget. Like an example would be something that's uncontrollable, hurricane season. We see that a lot in Florida, and you may have nurses that are having to stay over, work lots of extra shifts. It causes for an increase in overtime and those kind of things. That's uncontrollable. We can't do anything about that. Plan for it ahead of time and know that there may be something we can do, but it's uncontrollable. Understand the different phases of career development. Like, for example, the promise phase, that's gaining exposure to a variety of experiences. And that should be their goal when in the promise phase, like gaining exposure to a variety of different experiences. And understand the different phases of career development. Understand ways that nurse managers can help develop nurses' career. One of the best ways to promote a nurse's career is by providing the nurse with increasingly challenging work assignments that as they're able to take on and understand one patient population, you can then expand and give them a little bit more difficult patient to help them grow in their practice and continue to get better over time. So if you get stuck taking care of the same population and never get exposure to more complex patients while you have the support there, sometimes you won't grow as much. Sorry. Understand the importance of career planning and how it requires development and implementation of a long-term plan. That it's really important to, when you're wanting to, not necessarily as a brand new grad that you need to be thinking about this, but kind of understand what your goals are. And sometimes you don't know right away, and that's okay. But once you start having those goals, looking at what do I need to do, what do I need to get there. So I used to work rapid response, and I would a lot of times get asked, like, I want to do that. I want to be CCAT is what they call it at Lakeland Regional. And that takes some planning. It takes like, okay, if that's what you want to do, then you need to work in critical care for several years. you need to get your CCRN, Critical Care Registered Nurse certification, and then apply. So that takes some planning and thinking about what your ultimate goal is. I have some nurse friends that had goals of going into flight nursing, and flight nursing likes to have an experience they really like rapid response, and they also like ED. And lately, we actually had 3 different nurses that were a part of our rapid response team that are now flight. That's another piece. So your goal is flight. Well, one way to do that is to make sure you have, get into critical care, then move on to a rapid response, have all those certifications, get your paramedic, and then you can apply and move on to flight nursing, hopefully. That's a several years process and planning to implement that and make that. So make sure you understand that advancing your career, that there's all that planning that comes into play with that. Understand that when you're constructing a resume, you need to ensure that the document is concise and easy to read. You want it to be about 1 page long, not have a whole lot, like you have your report in your education, any major organizations you're part of, and your work experience, but trying to keep it very concise and easy to read. Understand how, for you guys right now, new nurses that are going to be graduating, it's important to develop those career goals. Sometimes you don't know, but it's important to have an idea of what you want to do, like what your initial goal is. If it's your first goal, my first goal is to pass my NCLEX and get a job in a cardiac step-down unit, something like that, to have some kind of goal. You've now worked at a couple different areas to know what you enjoy working in, what's important to you, and an area that you think you could succeed as a new grad. So it's important to start developing those career goals early. Understand what grapevine communication is, and how it can be difficult to stop or control. That's kind of that rumor mill, the grapevine communication. It's just like somebody telling somebody, then going to the next person, then the next person. It can kind of change over time, and it can be very difficult for the manager to stop or control it. When you're trying to understand organizational culture, it's important to try to perceive the dominant values, traditions, and beliefs in the organization. So really understand the traditions, beliefs, dominant values within that organization. That's how you can truly learn the culture. Like I said before, knowing their mission statement is really important. So we've talked about clinical nurse specialists. That's what my background is. We talked about how most clinical nurse specialists don't have those in the true clinical nurse specialist role. They're not just a background CNS and maybe working as a manager, because that happens a lot too, but somebody that their title is actually clinical nurse specialist are more a leadership role, not a management role. They don't have any formal authority over other staff. So for me, an example, like I'm clinical nurse specialist with our stroke program. I will see things that may happen. I constantly review charts and may see a process that was not followed. Sorry, my dog's barking. But I may see a process that was not followed. So for example, say a patient comes in for stroke and had orders for VTE prophylaxis, and that was never done. Like VTE prophylaxis placed SCDs, compression hose, or SCDs, the pumps on your patient's legs. It was never followed out. My next step is to inform the nursing leadership. I can go and talk to that nurse, but I couldn't do any formal write-up or anything like that with the staff. That would be the manager that would have to do that. So the CNS doesn't have any formal authority over staff members. Understand organizational charts and the flows that happen with them. So, like for example, if like there's a dotted line or like no solid line connecting somebody to anybody, then they don't have that authority over them. Understand that. So if you understand the clinical organizational charts, you'll be good. Understand what like a mid-level manager is and a top-level manager, the differences between those. So like for example, a house supervisor, like the administrative manager or nursing house supervisor, like would be a mid-level manager. And your managers like on your floors that you guys are doing your clinicals in, those managers like you're in the Lakeland Regional, like B3, B4, where you're doing your clinicals, those are mid-level managers. Then once you go up to the AVP, that's more the top level. The associate vice president is what AVP stands for. And so it goes like sometimes managers, sometimes directors, sometimes there's not a director, and then it goes AVP. So it's just knowing those steps and how far it goes. And they can be titled differently in different organizations, but if you know the steps, like, okay, you have my direct care nurse reports to the manager of the unit, and then so forth. But they have like the team leaders would be earlier too. Understand what expert power is with nursing knowledge, and how like a nurse with extensive expertise and specialized training in a certain area would be considered an expert power understand power and how when you have power, you generally gain additional power. So that's kind of like it's like the snowball effect. Once you're given some power, you then will start taking on more over time. Understand the authority power gap between a manager and employee, and understand like what would determine the size of that power gap, and it would be how credible the manager is perceived to be. So if the manager, like if they're perceived to be very credible, that is what's going to determine the size gap between the manager and authority, or the manager and the employee. So the authority power gap is determined by how credible the manager is. So when you're the best way for a manager to implement proactive political strategies is to assume authority to do something if it is not expressly prohibited. So like it's hasn't been, there's nothing that says we cannot do this. So allowing them to assume the authority to do something is the best way for a nurse manager to be proactive about political strategies. And so assuming authority to do something if it's not prohibited. Understand a functional model of care and delivery and how it is used. So, using your functions, like knowing that an RN are the ones that are able to do assessments based on their licensure and their degrees, but a CNA is not licensed, they may have a certification, they're not licensed to do an assessment. So based on like your functional model of care delivery. You would have your registered nurse do all assessments, and like CNAs do vital signs or baths, things like that. They're within their practice. Make sure you understand functional nursing. Okay, I think I went through everything. So like I said, if you understand all that I just went over with you, and then also review the PowerPoints, have read the chapter, you'll be good to go for the test. And it is opened. I extended it by a week, so you have until March 10th at 11:55 to complete it. And as always, please email me with any questions, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Okay, guys, have a great week and a great spring break.